Welcome in. It's another Football Friday. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, I'd like to take a quick moment to ask for a small favor. If you're enjoying all the content here, please take a second to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We just went over 4,000 subscribers, so really appreciate all the support. Follow wherever you listen to your audio versions, Apple, Spotify. It helps the show grow, and I genuinely appreciate that support. Every follow, subscription, download not only helps build our Locked On UConn community, but also generates more revenue for UConn NIL initiatives with Bleeding Blue for Good. And here's something I'm excited about. I'm donating 10% of all revenue to Husky Ticket Project. I'm a proud partner of theirs. It helps send kids to games like last week's against Wake Forest and this week's against Rice. And it's a fantastic initiative to help underserved kids in communities that don't get a lot of love. So thank you for being a part of this journey with me and with others, and for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, let's bring in the college football TNT podcast boys, Pete and Bobby. Let's do it now. Welcome to the show, boys. Let's unmute your mics so we can get all the hot takes that we can have. I'm going to get my tag off because everyone knows who I am. You can take this off the board. All right, guys, listen. I thought last week's game was kind of frustrating. Understanding we're playing an ACC opponent, and the opportunity was there to kind of take a win away from a team that was struggling. And pre-show, Pete, you mentioned that you felt like that they did a decent job against the mesh. I don't want to disagree with you, but I felt like with 2 weeks to prepare, it felt like they didn't really know what they wanted to do with it until later in the year. It's later in the game. I think the beginning they kind of handled it well, but as time went on, it really kind of wore them down. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I'll go back to our point from the previous week that Wake was better than advertised on film. They were better than a 2-14. Anybody that watched the film and knows anything about football knows that they clearly showed that, and they demonstrated that type of talent, that type of grit, and they were playing for something. They had to keep their bowl hopes alive. It was a must-win game situation for them, so they're going to come out fighting, probably paying a little bit more attention to their detail. And they're the only team in college football that pretty much runs that slow mesh. So, you don't see things in their reality until you actually go against it in game conditions. And so, yeah, there are some instances where they caught us on a couple of plays, but I think for the most part, I think we did a very decent job in slowing them down and adjusting to what they're trying to throw at us. We shut them down to 23 points, which I think was a lot less than most other teams that they played. We just got to score more points and have a total football game from the team and come out with the win. I mean, certainly the defense had their moments in giving up plays.
Sure.
I think for the most part, they did a decent job.
To that point, Bobby, Pete mentions, the defense pretty much held their own. And I agree with that too. I agree with it to a certain extent. I'm not going to belabor that point. But Bobby, he's right. Listen, this Wake Forest team came in giving up a lot of points, giving up a lot of yards, and UConn only rushed for about 45 yards on the game. What did you see in this game that was different about the line of scrimmage? They lost some offensive linemen, obviously, but even prior, I know it happened, I think late first, maybe early second, because even the flow of the game, first possession 3 and out, second possession 3 and out, or maybe third possession interception. So it didn't flow well regardless of the injuries early on.
Well, I agree with you. The injuries definitely played a big part in it for sure. But I think the other thing too is we got to give Wake Forest credit. I mean, that's an ACC football team with really good size on their defensive line, and I think that they were able to control the line of scrimmage. Temple was also able to do that, as we know. So hopefully, it's not a theme that continues moving forward.
Right.
Uh, we obviously got work to do when it comes to that. Um, Rice presents its own challenges when it comes to that. We'll get into that later, I'm sure. Um, but again, you just hope it's not a continuing theme moving forward. Yes, there's injuries, but I'll say every team in college football has to deal with those type of things.
Exactly. I mean, that's kind of my point, guys. Is like I people were giving me. I was furious at the end of the game when I did my live reaction show, and it was more just about. And we're going to get into this now with play calling and decision making on the coaching staff here in a second. But I totally understand when people say, well, we lost offensive linemen. You know, we kind of had this happen. Yeah, that's fine. But we're consumers of this, and I'm not on the field, and I don't know what these players are going through, and it has nothing to do with the players, but it's the coaches that's their job to get these guys to be ready next man up. So I felt like they run a lot of these stretch plays, and those just weren't working. What do you do, Pete, in a situation where you have something that is kind of like your bread and butter and it's being snuffed out? Like, how do you adjust to that? Because I felt like there weren't a lot of adjustments. They kind of felt like they were going to continue to do it until something popped. What are your thoughts?
They basically went to what the defense gave them, which was the passing game. And, as a result, we saw Nick Evers initially make some of his mistakes, with an early turnover, but, literally kind of evolve over the course of the game, lead, 2 scoring drives in the second half and almost pull it out. I mean, for a guy that has the limited experience that he has, to show the type of flashes, let's say, that he did was very encouraging as a result. It's going to bode and I think provide a victory in the long run for this team. And adding another dimension to the offense. It's not reflected in the score. But those are some of the things that you take away as a coach in the development of your team. Now, in terms of adjusting during the game, you got to look at the film, look at the video, and see what you're doing. I saw on the TV screen some glaring technical issues with the offensive line in terms of getting their center of mass on their blocking point. Having to be more of an emphasis, particularly against the kind of athletic fronts that we saw against Temple and this week against Wake. I'm pretty sure the coaches are seeing the same thing. It's just a matter of the players executing those little technical nuances and improving the overall status of the run game.
I'm going to go to Bobby on this one. I appreciate that, Pete. Bobby, if we're seeing the same things, you said you don't want it to be a pattern. Pete just talked about seeing some technical issues on the offensive line and how they block. If you're going up against, after what happened at Temple, where you weren't really able to run the ball well, and then on top of it, you exacerbate it by not having the same issues against Wake Forest, it kind of is a theme. You know what I mean? Like if we're 2 games in a row is a theme. It's not a coincidence anymore. So how does that happen when you have 2 weeks to prepare for this? That's my only question for all of this. Like, they had a bye week. We literally did a show during the bye week saying, what do we need to do during the bye week to not have a letdown? And it kind of was there. They looked flat. They didn't look like the team that was firing off the ball against past opponents.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that it didn't look the way that we probably expected it to. But again, I do want to give credit to Wake Forest. That is an ACC football team, and there is a difference between the level of talent in that Power 4 level compared to what we go against week in, week out. So I mean, I don't want to bring it down to that, just saying it's because they just have bigger, faster talent when it comes to the level that they play at. At the end of the day, though, I trust Gordon Samus to right the ship when it comes to the offensive line because he has proven that. during his time that he's been able to turn that around and get it going. And if I may, I'm just going to add to Pete's point that he just made. When we went down, I think that I won't say I think teams in the past would have probably folded, and we would have lost that game, say 40-6. Instead, we come back and perform at a pretty good level down the stretch and had a very, very good opportunity to win the football game late. So I want to give credit where credit's due with that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. And before we go to break, the last thing I'll say on this about the recap is I will say that there are UConn fans that appreciate both of your points and understand where both of you are coming from, but are kind of tired of the in the long run outlook. You know what I mean? I think that's the kind of prevailing theme that most fans are having, and I guess that that's why they're fans, and I can appreciate both sides of the equation, which is you're trying to grow a program for the future, but I felt like last week's game was a perception loss. Pete and I are down in North Carolina listening to the radio about that game. It was like, yeah, but we beat UConn. You understand what I'm saying? Like that's what the perception nationally, at least in this part of the country, is of UConn football. And if you win that game, that perception starts to change. Same if you win the game against Duke. So again, that's my biggest issue with kind of the moral victory. And I know you guys aren't saying that, but that kind of mentality. All right, we're going to go to a break. And when we come back, I want to talk about some play calling. I know it's your favorite topic, Pete, so we'll get you the first crack at it. Coming up after this. ZBiotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic designed by PhD scientists to help you avoid rough mornings after drinking. When you drink, alcohol turns into an unwanted byproduct in your gut. ZBiotics breaks it down so you can wake up feeling refreshed. Just make ZBiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly and enjoy tomorrow. Head to ZBiotics/LockedOnCollege and use the promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off your first order. Plus, it's backed by 100% money-back guarantee. This segment is brought to you by PrizePicks, the #1 daily fantasy sports app with 5 million active users. PrizePicks is super simple. Just pick 2 to 6 players, and if they hit their projections, you can win up to 100 times your money. PrizePicks offers an injury insurance policy, so if one of your players gets injured in the first half, your lineup still stays in the game. And here's the bonus. Download PrizePicks, the app right now, and use code LockedOnCollege to get $50 instantly when you make your first $5 deposit. That's code LockedOnCollege on PrizePicks for $50 free. No need to win. The bonus is guaranteed. PrizePicks. Run your game. All right, we're back on Locked on UConn with Pete Callan and Bobby Wilson of the TNT College Football Podcast. All right, boys. So I know I'm going to go right to the play calling, and it's a decision that I thought was indicative of how the season has gone in these what I call perception games against these higher profile opponents, in particular against Duke and now against Wake Forest. You have a 4th and 1 with about 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. I don't know the exact number, but we can always look that up. And Jim Mora decides to punt. Down 10. I totally disagree with it. In particular, with the plays that led up to it. I feel like they felt like they got a first down. The PA announcer says first down UConn, and it was ends up being 3rd and 1. So they go shotgun and run about an 8-yard hitch that gets incomplete, and now it's 4th and 1. First off, it's on Jim Mora to understand that situation, to go, wait. It's actually 3rd and 1. What the hell are we doing in shotgun when we can get 1 yard? I don't think they're going 3rd and 1. Even Ross Tucker, who called the game, not a huge fan, but he was all over that. It was like, I don't think Gordon Samus is running a 8-yard hitch on 3rd and 1 if they knew it was going to be 4th down after that. That was a first down pass, essentially. So that got totally screwed up, 100%. Then on top of it, you exacerbate it by not going for it on 4th and 1. I think they were on the 38-yard line. They weren't? Where were they at?
35.
Okay, pardon me, 3 yards. I think the issue is I just don't see Jim Mora being as aggressive as he was in his press conference as a play caller. That to me is what's frustrating. It's like the after effect is always more aggressive than the in-game. Pete?
And here's why. Even Ross Tucker said inexplicably they should go for it because Wake Forest has been moving the ball against them all day. And I agree. There wasn't a time where our defense up until the fourth quarter didn't stop them for 35 yards. Why would you go for it with 7 minutes left, 7.5 minutes left, at jeopardy of not getting the first down when you haven't run the ball on them all day and jeopardize going down by 13 or even 17? That is a totally
because you lost the game anyway.
Call to be kind. Well, you put
lost
yourself
the game
in a
anyway,
position to fight back, and you put yourself in position to fight back, which you did, and you got within 3, and you were driving down to score either tie or possibly win the game when unfortunately one of your linemen went offsides and created a 4th and 8 situation as opposed to a 4th and 3. So in terms of putting your team in the best position to win, he did exactly that. You don't go for it on your own 35-yard line with 7.5 minutes down when you're not stopping anybody for 35 yards. And on top of that, you have had trouble getting a yard. You've had trouble getting off your double teams and getting the second-level players, the linebackers, making plays on your backs the whole day, shutting them down to 1 or 2 yard gains. You don't do it.
So I disagree because of what we saw on the next possession, which is their ability to move the ball. And that's what's most infuriating to me is that they seem to find ways to move the ball when it's necessary, but not like during the actual flow of the game. Like that last possession that they went down and they threw that touchdown pass. I think it was on 4th and 15 or something like that. And it was a beautiful back shoulder throw. But that drive is indicative of what they could have been doing all game, because we talked about this, about how Wake Forest's secondary was incredibly vulnerable. And they didn't really process that until it was too late. And so to not have the guts to go for it on a 4th and 1, regardless of where you are on the field, it's about the time you had. If there was 12 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, I would 100% agree with you, because you still have time. You still have time to create a drive, 2 drives now. Remember, it's not just one. There was no sense of urgency, Pete. Like, that's my biggest issue. And that's what Ross Tucker was saying. And I was agreeing with him, which is about the sense of urgency. Like, why is it taking so long for plays to come in and to get this going? That was the issue. So even if you do punt there, maybe there's time left. There wasn't enough time to get 2 scores, even though you're driving there where they got that terrible pass interference where he went nuts, and it was totally warranted because it was pass interference. But you put yourself in that position to rush at the end of the game because you didn't go for it when you should have in that scenario on their 35. Bobby, do you agree with me, or do you agree with Pete? I want to get you in on here. I know we know Pete's opinion on this 100%.
I 100% agree with Pete. Just that situation, we haven't proved all game that we can get a yard in that situation. I understand the other side of the argument, like the time perspective, the fact that we're not moving with a sense of urgency. Like, okay, I get it. But we haven't proved all game, one, that we can get a yard in that scenario where we need to get it. And then secondly, we haven't stopped them. If we give them the ball back in that situation, they are going to score and the game's going to be over. And I understand that we lost the game, but punting allowed our defense to get that stop. We get the ball back, we score, and we are in a perfect situation to go down and win the game. And we had every opportunity to do so on that last drive. Obviously, the PI call, it is what it is. We all know that it was wrong. Everybody who watches it knows that that's wrong. But we put ourselves in the best situation to win the football game, in my honest opinion.
Okay. I mean, we all have our opinions. You guys disagree with me, and that's fine. I just feel like in today's day and age, with people hate to hear about analytics, they hate to hear about like all that stuff, but it's there is literally an entire website called I forget the exact name, but something about like the type of football you're playing is not winning football. It's kind of that old school mentality of football. And Jim Mora is an old school mentality football guy, and I respect him. I respect the hell out of Jim Mora. I just don't know if that was the right decision at that time, because again, the result is the result. And what does Bill Parcells say about your record? You are who your record says you are. And unfortunately, that's what UConn is right now, which is they've made strides. The program's in a much better position. But I just feel like for me, I want to see a little more. I want to see the fire from the press conference where he cursed and said, it was a BS call and all that other stuff. But I want to see that. I want to see that indicative in his play calling and his aggressiveness, because that team was ripe for the picking, especially through the air. And we wanted to try to establish the run. We couldn't do it, and we didn't really kind of use what they were giving us until it was too late. And that's the way that felt like for me. Pete, you want to jump in, and then we'll move on.
I'd rather take a scenario in the game where you possibly slow your own team down and take the soul of both units if you make that mistake and not get it. Because that's what you would have done if had you not made that fourth down. You would have possibly had the offense go in the funk and the defense be very pressured and anxious in a short field situation, possibly giving up a score. You don't do that as a coach.
All right. I mean, I can see that, but what do you do? What do you do with your team if you get that? If you get that and you end up going down and scoring there, what does that do to your team in that hypothetical? Since we're playing that hypothetical game, like what's the scenario if you get that fourth down and then you drive to at least maybe kick a field goal at minimum, and there's more time to get a stop and get the ball back?
If hindsight's 20/20, if we go down and score, it's all great and you're a hero. But the probabilities show that most likely you're still getting another third, fourth down. You might have to punt and pin them even deeper because you're starting at the 35. But all the circumstances and all the scenarios leading up to that point didn't show that we were going to make that play. Rhythm wasn't there. I'd rather punt, fight, live another day, and build on the rhythm that you were building up in better circumstances, which they did, and it turned out, in my opinion, to be the right decision.
Okay, we'll agree to disagree. All good. That's what this show is about. Just having some healthy debate. Appreciate you. I'm going to take a quick break, pay a couple more bills, and when we return, let's talk about Rice. Is it a get right game? Do we get some predictions from you guys? And we'll look ahead. Coming up after this. What's up, NFL fans? You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com to get started. Oh, it's my old pals at Home Field. Look at this. This is the classic campus pullover. I wore it special for them. I'm literally decked out in head to toe Home Field. I got my joggers, UC joggers on. I literally have Home Field socks on. I would show you, but I don't want to scare anybody. So I just wanted to give you guys, this apparel is so comfortable. It is the best vintage and unique college gear you can find. If you're a true UConn fan, you got to check it out. It's the perfect mix of comfort and style. Vintage UConn logo that screams school pride. Look, I got the old Husky on here. It's fantastic, and it's a must-have for the fall season. So head over to homefieldapparel.com. Use the code UConn24 for 15% off your first purchase. Show your Husky pride with Home Field. Sorry for the cough there, Home Field. All right, we're back on Locked On UConn with Pete Callen and Bobby Wilson of the TNT College Football Podcast. All right, guys. So let's forget last week. whether there's frustration or optimism from what you saw, and we play Rice. I'll admittedly don't know a ton about the Rice football team. That's why I have you two experts on today, and always. Bobby, what can we expect from Rice on the offensive side, and what are some keys to kind of getting right in this game?
Well, from the Rice perspective, they're going to have a air raid offense where they're going to look to spread it around. UConn fans will probably know their quarterback, E.J. Warner, who comes from Temple to Rice. He's a guy that we were recruiting as well through the process. He is talented. He's a talented player, but he's turned it over a bunch this year, and they just haven't been able to flow offensively the way that you would potentially expect them to. Dean Connors, their running back, he's their top rusher, but he's also their leading pass catcher from a receiving perspective. He's a talented player out of the backfield. I like him a lot. He's a really talented player. He can do a lot of things. But again, they're going to look to air it out. When they do run, it's the typical air raid type of runs where they kind of look to gash you. I believe they average 5.3, 5.6 yards per carry, somewhere in that range, if I remember correctly. So when they do run, they do a good job doing it, but it's because they spread you out and get you in opportune situations to run the ball. I know in the past we've struggled when teams spread us out, so it'll be interesting to see how we handle that from that perspective. Wake Forest, Maryland, some of those teams have looked to spread us out as well. I think obviously we handled it much better against Wake than we did previously. And I think this is a game where you look at them and we should win this game by multiple scores. We're just better than they are. We should be able to control both sides of the line of scrimmage. That's where this game, as every game, is going to be won and lost.
Okay. Pete, what about the defensive side? What can we expect from our defense to try to stop that air raid offense that Rice is going to run?
Well, the past few spread type offenses we played, we've done pretty well, shutting them down below their scoring averages. So, Coach Brock and company are doing a good job adapting to the challenges that are being presented by these teams. I see no different approach than what they're doing. The only difference is we're not playing a slow mesh team like we have in Wake Forest. They're more conventional in terms of their running, some pin pull kind of what we call run schemes in terms of pulling linemen, doing counters and things of that nature, more so than zone. And they're going to be doing pass run options with EJ because he's more of a passer than a runner, reading second level defenders and trying to, pull the ball if they commit to the run to get, pass plays behind it. I think we match up better against their receivers and against their offensive line with our defensive personnel. So we did a pretty good job against a more experienced quarterback in JT Daniels last year, and not playing a 3-3-5. We have better personnel all around, but we should fare better.
Okay, that's fair. Does this feel like a get right game? I don't want to disparage Rice and say this is like they're a must win or all that stuff. But what do you think, Bobby? Is this what we call a get right game, or are we kind of in for more of a battle than we think?
Well, I think it definitely presents that opportunity. I will say last week Rice played Tulane, and they played that game significantly closer than anybody would have imagined. That was a game going into the fourth quarter at Tulane, and I think that really surprised a lot of people. But at the end of the day, if we're looking at Rice for the longevity of the season, it's definitely one of those games where we should be able to go out there and do the things that we want to do, because they've allowed that against the majority of their schedule.
Okay. Pete, what do you think is going to be the identity of this team from the offensive side of the ball for UConn Do you think we're going to see a lot more attempt to establish the run, obviously against a lesser opponent, or do you think we're going to try to build off of Nick's passing from last week?
I think we're going to stick to what we do best. We attempt to do best, which is run the football. I brought up some glaring technical issues with the offensive line, but those same issues are very fixable. And so if they go into the lab, so to speak, this week and make more of a conscious effort to correct those things, I think we should do pretty good. Now, granted, Rice this is a revenge game for Rice. We went in there how they're ranked and back at us. That coaching staff is a good coaching staff in terms of taking that team, which doesn't go to bowl games normally, to 2 straight bowl games. So there's going to be a challenge there for us to make sure we're on point with our game, and it's going to be a challenge for us.
All right. I want some predictions from you. Bobby, what you got? By the way, we were all wrong about the Wake Forest game. So just to give people a precursor, what do you think the score is going to be? What do you think the outcome is going to be for the 3:30 game on Saturday against Rice?
Well, I will say the Wake Forest game, I said we'd lose 24-21. So I guess I was close, but unfortunately,
but no, I was kidding. You were the closest. You were the closest of all. I could say that for sure.
Unfortunately, I think we win this game 34-17. We're the better team. I think we're going to be able to just control the line of scrimmage. I think we're going to be able to force some turnovers in this game. E.J. Warner, like I said earlier, he's been prone to turnovers this year, and I just think we're going to be able to take care of business and do the things that we need and want to do.
Okay, I'm aligned with you on that. I have a lower score, but go ahead, Pete. Give me yours first.
I agree with Bobby. I think the score is going to be similar, 31-17 UConn. I think they get back to their standard, take care of business.
Okay. I think it's a double-digit win, but I'm going much lower scoring. I think sometimes I've been totally guilty of this, of kind of being like, this team is an offensive juggernaut, blah, blah, blah. They're still trying to figure stuff out. And I think that's the one thing that the prevailing theme is this program is on the ascension. It's not where it's going to be, next year. And I think they're going to win this game 21-9. I think they still win the game. I think they dominate on defense, but I don't think they score a ton of points. If I'm wrong, I'll be cheering them on as happy as can be. But that's kind of where I think we're at right now as a team. Any parting shots, Pete? Before we turn this episode and put it to bed.
First of all, I want to say, Husky Nation, I love y'all. Even the fourth down Peacock Feather Brigade. Please show out again. This team needs you. You are a 12th man. Don't be discouraged by what you saw last week. Things are on the rise, and they're going to be put together, I think, this week and beyond. So go out there and support that team this week.
Bobby?
Like Pete said, pack the rent and roll skis.
That's right. Hey, by the way, over 30,121 at attendance. So let's keep that going up. I'll echo Pete. I was frustrated last Saturday, but let me tell you, keep supporting your team no matter what, and we're always going to be here to cover it. So this has been another episode of Locked On UConn. If you see the ticker, make sure you follow the College Football Podcast. Follow me on all socials on Locked On UConn, and also go subscribe to this show if you haven't already. This has been another episode of Locked On UConn. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto, for Pete Callen and Bobby Wilson. Go Huskies. Get that dub.